Let's break down the war within early access. It starts August 22nd, and there's quite a lot of things to get into. So, in terms of time, 3 p.m. Pacific US, 6 p.m. Eastern US, 11 p.m. UK, midnight Central European summertime, and luckily for them, 8 a.m. over in Sydney. Now, the way expansion launch will work is that the introductory quest will just trigger in-game at that time, so you can be logged in and you won't need to do anything, and I certainly do recommend you log in well beforehand because login queues, of course, could happen. Now, that'll take you through the introductory quest line, after which you'll be in Kazalgar, but in its advanced access state, and that does mean that quite a lot of things are going to be different. Like your keybinds, if you've done them right, because we just published our deep dive into keybinding over at Bellular.games, as well as our keybinding tool and a host of other guides and a new lore walking episode. There's going to be much more for the War Within's launch, and seriously over there, you guys are making a difference. It is the best place to support my team. We've got big plans for it. And I mean, we've had a few hundred new members over the last month, which has been crazy, and that momentum has just got the team fired up. But okay, let's talk about what you can and can't do in early access for the War Within. The entire campaign and all the side quests are going to be available, and that means that yes, you can level fully from level 70 to 80, and once you hit level 71, you'll get access to hero talents, and those you'll have maxed out by level 80. Now, there are no restrictions in how you play there. You can do as much as you want, no penalty, no restriction, just go play the full thing. Now, as you level, you'll find both dungeons and delves, both of which are active during early access, but they're a little bit limited. So, dungeons are limited to normal and follower mode only, so no heroic, no mythic 0, or mythic plus. And to level 80, those normal dungeons will be dropping eye level 541 non-upgradable gear, which is quite low, but I mean, this is early access. The entire point is that you're not really worrying about gear or anything like that. As for delves, they will be open, but you'll be limited to a maximum of tier 3, and at max level, that'll be eye level 554 gear that for the early access period won't be upgradable. Now, this is just going to be enough for you to basically try out all the delves, level up in them a bit, and just start leveling Bran, but really that is about it. As for PvP, there ain't much during early access. Like, war mode is there, but proper gear progression and that sort of stuff isn't, and the honor cap will be set to 4,000, increasing to 14,000 at launch. Then there's Renown. Renown will be capped at 25, and of course, one of the nice things is that your Renown is warband wide. Now, I really doubt the cap of 25 will matter that much, and that's because world quests, world events, and like the big weekly quest, those only become available after the first weekly reset of the War Within, which of course will be on the 27th for the US, 28th for the EU. So basically, your early access reputation sources will be quite limited. They'll mostly just be side quests and that sort of thing. You'll get a little bit of progression with your renowns, but nothing serious for endgame. Then, for professions, well, they are active and you can level them up, but there are restrictions on specialization points. Basically, any of those weekly sources of them just won't be available. We're not 100% sure if actually specs are just entirely disabled or if it's only the weekly sources of spec points that are turned off, but either way, you get the point here. What they want you to do is play the expansion, enjoy the content, but not get any sort of unfair advantage. So, to make that clear then, here's what won't be available, and here's when content will become active. World quests and world events, with the world events being this expansion's equivalent to the likes of, say, the Tuskar Soup and such Dragonflight, those will be open with our first weekly reset, which is just a few hours after the game launches on the 26th. At least for the US, I think that's like 6 hours after launch. Heroic Dungeons will also be open with the full launch of the game, and remember, Heroic Dungeons drop gear that is quite a bit better than you will have remembered from, say, Dragonflight launch, and they are a good bit harder. So those will basically be your like pre-season source of gear. As for PvE gear upgrades, it seems they won't really be available during early access. You'll have noticed that the likes of delves and normal dungeons, which will be your best early access sources of gear, well, they're dropping non-upgradable gear. So it's, again, very clear Blizzard do not really intend this to be something where, you know, you can just go hyper game, get a kitted out character. Also, the Great Vault will not be active at all during early access, meaning, yes, early access is about seeing content, exploring the world, and not getting back to the gear grind. So, that's how those things work. Let's talk about the seasonal content so you know what's on the horizon. Season 1 is where the real endgame kicks off, and that begins September 10th for the US and 11th for the EU. Now, this is when the full range of content starts to become available, and I say starts because it isn't everything. So, let's break it down week by week. Week 1 of Season 1 brings us the first wing of LFR plus normal and heroic difficulties for the raid. Mythic 0 dungeons will also become available, and Delves tier 4 through 11 will unlock, and along with that we also get the new Mage Tower style Delve, which is basically just a boss fight against one of Xal'atath's lieutenants. Now that's also, of course, when Season 1 of PvP will officially start, and that's one that's actually kind of exciting this time around. Basically, that's because Battleground Blitz is now official, which essentially means you can do solo queue, rated battlegrounds, and you can properly gear up a character without having to do arena, and of course that is with Blizzard adding a new battleground to the mix. Then finally, the heroic dungeon queue will switch over from being all of the launch expansions to being the Season 1 dungeon content. What that basically means is Arakara, City of Threads, Stone Vault, Dawnbreaker, and then some of our Shadowlands favourites, Mist of Tyrna Scythe and Necrotic Wake, as well as Siege of Borealis and Grim Batol. And that brings me to week 2. So week 2 brings Mythic Raid, Mythic Plus Dungeons, LFR Wing 2, and Story Mode, with Story Mode basically being our new and strange way of doing a raid. It's very much launching in a V1 state, so you can do the solo or with friends, and it's only the final boss, right? So you just kill the final boss in a fairly easy pared down fashion, and it essentially exists less to give you a full narrative raid experience and more to just let people continue the endgame campaign, right? Like knock out the boss, do the rest of the campaign, and see all of the content, rather than having to wait even more for the final LFR wing. Speaking of which, on week 3, which is September 24th or 25th for the EU, that sees the release of the third and final wing of LFR, and with that, well, that's basically it for the launch of this expansion. But that won't be all. Blizzard have actually recently said that number 1, there's going to be a Warcraft Direct, which will be some sort of stream giving us a bunch of updates later on in the year, and they've said that October will see basically events and that kind of thing go on because it's the 20th anniversary of the game. And then we've also seen that an encrypted build of patch 11.0.5 has hit Blizzard's test servers. Of course, we can't really tear into that yet, but basically it does seem that they're ready for quite a bit of content afterwards. If you're wondering what you should do, right? Well, yeah, it'll be a bit strange logging into the 22nd and having to wait 2.5 weeks for what we would usually just be thinking about for our WoW content, but I wouldn't really worry. There is a shitload of stuff to do. Number 1, with this, there's no better time to level your alts, and War Within has even got a nice little boost in the form of your Warband bonuses. So you get a 5% XP boost for every level 80, with that capping at a 25% boost for having a total of 5. Now, if you combine that with the War Mode XP boost, then you really will be just flying through the levels. So that's one thing for you to do. The other then is side quests. You can do those to progress your renowns. That'll be dead handy as well because they are account wide. And so if you want to properly progress that, but also level up some alts, what you can do is just level up your main character by, of course, doing the campaign and a few side quests here and there. What I then plan to do is to level up my other 2 alts by basically 100%ing the first 2 zones and the last 2 zones. That should be enough for me to get a fairly different leveling experience on every one of those characters. I'll literally see all of the content, but of course, because our renowns are account wide, I'll actually still be getting full progress on all of those. And while I don't think we'll be able to get anywhere near to the renown cap of 25 during early access, we will be able to make a start, and that will be quite handy. I mean, early on, at about rank 7 or 8 for 3 of the renowns, you get veteran gear that's item level 584, so even just that as an early target will be handy for getting other characters geared up. Then of course there's professions where the usual expansion launch thing applies, where the gathering ones are probably going to be a really big moneymaker if you just want simple, reliable money. Basically early on, people just go mad trying to level their professions fast, and that usually sends the price of materials soaring. The only thing though is that with specialization points only kicking off with the full War Within launch, we could see the market dynamics change a little bit, but I do think the typical wisdom of just gathering being a high ROI activity early on, I think that will still hold. So that'll be more than enough to keep you going for a few days. Once full release happens, you'll be able to hop into heroic dungeons and ideally get yourself decked out in pre-season best in slot gear. Then of course, renown for each faction, and that just means doing plenty of events, plenty of world quests, and a few unique things that are there for each renown. As an example, with Aj Kahet, it's actually 3 characters, and you can progress progress with one of them each week, and it's even got its own zone-specific currency, so there's quite a lot there. And then there's all the other stuff, like knocking down your zone-specific achievements, killing all of the rares to, I guess, get the achievements, but also some of the unique things that they'll drop, as well as collecting the questing and dungeoning transmogs, which honestly, this time around, look really good, especially the Hallowfall one. Now, the other main thing that I'll be doing will be practicing. That also means it's a perfect time to hone my key bindings and hone my UI, and if you would like a pretty handy guide for doing that, well, the good news is we've released the video on the channel, but if you want to take a look over at Bellular.games, we've got a full written guide, we've got our guide into choosing a spec that you'll enjoy, and a whole bunch of other things. So you can support us there, get even more content, and hours of lore podcasts to listen to while you do things over in Kaz-Elgar. But if you want to check out another video, well, I definitely recommend the key binding one. I think you'll get a lot of value out of it.